This might be a turning point in entertainment. So Iron Lung is a movie adaptation of the video game of the same name created by David Szymanski. That's right, one guy alone made that video game, and it gained a lot of popularity when the YouTuber Markiplier did a playthrough of it on his channel. Markiplier is a guy who on YouTube is known for playing video games as well as creating a lot of other content and has amassed quite a following over the years. I used to watch him quite a bit when I was in high school, haven't as much in recent years, but I heard he was making this movie and that it was a passion project that he was funding himself, and I was very curious to check it out regardless. But not only was Markiplier self-financing this movie, he was directing, writing, starring, editing, and also distributing it all on his own. The film supposedly cost somewhere around $3 million to make and has since made back a ton of money as a result of that. And aside from playing the video game, I went in as blind as humanly possible. I think years ago I did see a teaser trailer, but it didn't give much away. All I saw was Markiplier rising out of a pit full of blood, and I was like, okay. But aside from that, I never watched any officially released trailers, nor did I keep up with any of the behind the scenes stuff until after the film came out. So the concept of this film is humanity is on its last legs because there was this event called the Quiet Rapture in which a bunch of planets and stars vanished. They were gone, and all that is left of humanity is the people who were left on the space stations. Markiplier is playing a convict who has been sentenced to navigating a blood ocean on this distant moon, and the vessel he has been given to navigate said blood ocean is known as the Iron Lung. It is a vessel that will descend into the blood ocean, is welded shut so he can't get out. There's no visibility outside of the vessel itself, and he is down there to navigate via the coordinates and take pictures using this X-ray camera that he has attached to the front of it. So starting off with the acting, Markiplier is a YouTuber, so I know him from what he does on his YouTube channel. I was not aware of whether or not he could actually pull off any decent acting, and I was very pleasantly surprised to find out that this guy actually has some talent. He's really good at channeling emotion, especially that raw, angry frustration, and I'd say he doesn't do so bad when he's trying to portray sadness either. And I'm always a big stickler on this one because a lot of times when actors try to sell that they're crying, they do a lot of crocodile tear crap. I did appreciate that he was at least able to have his eyes well up while he was getting emotional in these scenes. I just wish that maybe, let a tear fall or two to really sell it. But otherwise, I think he did a fairly decent job and clearly has a lot of talent that he can develop over the years if he continues to make movies. Also, I have to shout out the fact that this has some incredible practical effects and production design, the makeup design, the fact that this movie set a record for the most amount of fake blood used in a film ever, and the fact that the actual set looks exactly like how the Iron Lung video game does, at least not in the pixelated rendered version that we get in the actual game. They brought that set to life. And as for cinematography, I would say from a visual standpoint, this looks pretty good. Like, there are Netflix original films out there that have way more money pumped into them, and they look far crappier than this low-budget movie did. That said, because this is a directorial debut and Markiplier, I'm assuming, doesn't have actual, film school background by any means, there are a couple of times where scenes feel repetitive, certain shots feel repetitive. I can't tell you how many times we are cutting to pipes with condensation running down them. That seems to be a very common thing. Obviously, it's something done to build the tension and to show the claustrophobic nature of the actual set. A lot of shots are really zoomed in on to emphasize this feeling of claustrophobia throughout the film, and I think it does a pretty good job at doing that. But yeah, because we are stuck inside this vessel for the entire film, it does get a little repetitive in terms of what you can show and what you can't. But I will champion him for at least trying to make it look as visually interesting as possible, because there are some shots, especially like the depth meter that is going down or rising, that I think really look amazing. And for a directorial debut, this is a great looking film. However, there are moments where the film struggles to illustrate the physics of what is happening in certain scenes, because everything in the film is inside the Iron Lung. As the main convict is welded into this vessel, so is the camera, so is the audience. We do not see any exterior shots of the Iron Lung except for maybe one time. And so when stuff goes pear-shaped and things start moving the vessel around, they are trying to illustrate the impact, and they do this by showing Markiplier flying up against the walls and repeatedly rolling over. And the really cool part of that is that they did it practically, because they had a 9,000 pound set rigged up on some kind of contraption that would rock it back and forth, so Markiplier, while in it, would feel the force and the weight and the physics of what was actually happening in the scene and wouldn't have to like just simulate that himself. So when he's getting thrown around, he's actually getting thrown around. The problem is they fix the camera to the set and don't let it so much as jostle even slightly when the impact strikes, so you don't, as the audience, feel that impact. We're witnessing it from a specifically fixed angle, and while we understand what is happening, there are no windows in the vessel itself that can even illustrate the motion of the ship, let alone just how forceful the hit is.
Editing Michael here to clarify something. Obviously, if they put windows on the Iron Lung, there wouldn't be a whole lot to see outside, especially underwater, that would clarify what the motion of the actual vessel was doing. I was just using this to illustrate a point that usually when they're doing something like this and you have a fixed camera inside the cabin of a spaceship or a plane or some other vehicle, usually windows are a good way to simulate or demonstrate the kind of motion that the vehicle finds itself in. Obviously that wouldn't have worked given the concept that we have here, but at the same time I was just trying to demonstrate and further illustrate why this scene was limited in that way.
Like I mentioned, this is all inside the vessel itself, so the narrative is more so what he can do to navigate without us actually witnessing it. It's a pressure cooker type of film, something akin to like The Guilty or Phone Booth or Buried, 127 Hours. So if you're into that kind of thing, I think this could work for you, but I have to say the atmosphere of the film, much like the game, is very, very haunting. There's a very claustrophobic feel to it, and the fact that the only glimpse outside that vessel you get is from the X-ray camera that shoots through the blood to show what's in the actual blood ocean is amazing. Is very limiting, yet very intriguing. About a month ago, I played the game for the first time, and I was actually really impressed after I figured out how to freaking play the game, because right away I was getting pissed at the controls, but the person you play as in the game is very much a blank slate, doesn't have any dialogue, and it's meant to be so like it's an all-encompassing experience for the player. This lays enough of a foundation for the movie to work with, but doesn't exactly lay out everything story-wise like something like The Last of Us HBO show would. And I would say, as far as video game adaptations, Markiplier did a pretty solid job of adapting this faithfully from the source material, but that might also come at the cost of it being not as accessible to wider audiences. For example, this film is far too long. It was like 2 hours and 2 minutes or something like that, and I think the perfect runtime for this film would be somewhere in the 90 to 100 minute bracket. The pace is very much a slow burn. I knew that going in, I expected that, and I was perfectly fine sitting through it, although I could definitely see if a person who is walking in this completely blind, who is not attached to the game, is sitting down to watch this and sees this as nothing more than just a drag. I think it starts off with a good enough hook, and I think it ends pretty strong, but it's right in the middle section, which will be the majority of the film, that will definitely test whether or not a person is enjoying this. And even though I do feel like I have some valid criticisms for how the film could have been improved, I don't think that this film outright sucked, which is an achievement in and of itself. That said, I would have liked to have seen the exterior at least more than once, because sometimes limitations of a video game don't always have to mean they are a limitation on the adaptation. For example, Supernatural, which was a TV show that ran for many, many years, had an episode where they specifically were trying to be experimental, and they said, hey, what if we decided to make an entire episode revolving around the car? So the challenge of that episode was to keep the car in frame at every point in that episode. And quite frankly, it is one of my favorite episodes of the entire show. But that did not mean they had to keep the camera inside the car the whole time. There are plenty of exterior shots. There are plenty of shots with the car from a distance. There just had to be a way to keep the car in frame, and I thought they pulled it off very well. The same could have been said for the Iron Lung. We probably could have seen exterior shots here and there just to break up the time we had inside the actual vessel, and just to also build tension and see what this whole environment looked like.
You know, I thought I was being pretty profound with that statement, but while editing I realized something. It wouldn't really make a whole lot of sense to have an exterior shot, considering the blood ocean is literally opaque to the point where they can't see through it and are relying on coordinates and an X-ray camera to see down there because that's how limited visibility is. So if a camera was to sit in a blood ocean outside of the actual vessel, you wouldn't see anything other than blood. Now granted, maybe the audience would just have to suspend disbelief for a second, considering that when we watch Star Wars, there's no sound in space, and yet we can hear the ships and the cannons firing, and we just kind of go with it. But considering the whole point of this film relies on an X-ray camera, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to keep jumping to exterior shots and showing something that would be slightly or clearly visible outside of the ship if the whole point of this entire story is they can't see anything and need the X-ray camera. Then again, we did get that one exterior shot, didn't we?
I understand it for a video game, especially with the limitations, and I understand it for even a film with limitations. Maybe that would have cut too much into a VFX budget that they just weren't willing to fund. I say they, it was one guy, it was Markiplier. He's been very upfront about this. But either way, I still think the end product turned out pretty good. I've been hearing a lot of people saying that the audio in the film, the sound mixing was a problem because they couldn't always make out what people were saying, especially over the intercom. I didn't think it turned out that bad. I just remember there was one situation where there was something being repeated constantly over and over and over and over and over again on the intercom, and every single time that they said whatever it was, I genuinely had no idea what they were saying. So if that's what they're talking about, I totally understand. Otherwise, I'm not sure. And apparently there's still some debate on the internet as to what was being said, so that's also not great. But setting aside adoration and criticism, this film's success right now in the box office is huge. A self-funded, self-distributed, low-budget indie horror video game adaptation starring a YouTuber beat Sam Raimi at the box office this weekend. This is an incredible signal to people that success can be had outside the Hollywood machine. Now, let's not kid ourselves for a second. Markiplier clearly has a dedicated fan base and was in a position where he could financially support this film by himself. Not everyone out there who aspires to be a filmmaker can do that, and clearly it doesn't matter how good or bad this movie was going to be, his fans were going to show up regardless. And the film is very clearly printing money for him because he more than tripled his budget after the first couple days it was out. My point in bringing this up, though, is the fact that studios are desperate for improvement and are dying to figure out how they can cast a wider net and draw in more revenue. And when stuff like Terrifier 4 is beating Joker 2, a follow-up to a billion-dollar film at the box office on a budget of just a couple $1 million, that is insane. And in this instance, where we have a well-known YouTuber funding a passion project that he is working tirelessly on himself, while also maintaining his YouTube career on top of that and putting it out and making in millions and having nothing but success, studios are going to want to figure out how to do that too. And I don't know if that means they're just going to start picking up influencers here and there and just attaching them and giving them passion projects and saying, here, have a couple $1 million, make whatever you want, we need the money and we want to capitalize on your fan base. I can easily see them doing that. But the fact of the matter is, it is very obvious, regardless of what you think about where cinema is going, the fact that this many people, this many sold out showings are happening for a film this small and this niche shows that people are still willing to go to the theater. Above all else, people are going to the theater. They are just not going to the theater for what the studios think they want. The problem doesn't rest on the idea of a movie theater being an outdated form of entertainment. Clearly, people are still willing to put forth the money and do it. Clearly, if something is important enough, if something is a big enough event, it will draw in people to go see it. They just want to be a part of that event. So I guess time will tell how many YouTubers are going to start becoming filmmakers, because it has been a trend over the recent years with people like the Philippou brothers, people like Zach Hadel and Mike Cusack, because clearly there's a lot of people who like these creators for various reasons and just flock to whatever they put out because they're a fan of them. Now, what I'm about to say might sound like a weird comparison. Sean Chandler recently put out a video talking about how people are drawn to directors of films as opposed to actual stars of films. They recognize the name behind the creation and they think, oh, Christopher Nolan's putting out a movie this year? I gotta see what his next movie is, regardless of what kind of topic he's tackling. Denis Villeneuve, Martin Scorsese, okay, let's go. People in this day and age really like the creators of the actual project, and I think that can also extend to YouTubers Again, this might be a really weird comparison, but when you think about the level of fan base that a YouTuber has, that is a valuable asset to themselves, really, and a studio might recognize that. So basically what I'm trying to say is, this is something that film studios might be delving into and might be looking at, considering Markiplier's success just by himself. I wouldn't be surprised in the next 5 years, we're all of a sudden getting the announcement that Markiplier is working with A24 to make some low-budget indie horror movie. Either way, I consider this a win for anyone trying to make a film outside of the Hollywood machine. Markiplier did it, and he is rolling in the dough right now. Not that he didn't have any to begin with, but much respect to him for actually pulling it off, and also just producing a film that I actually enjoyed. Unlike Shelby Oaks. So yeah, maybe I'm biased because I'm a fan of the game, but if I had to give this one a score out of 10, I'm going to have to give it an 8. Sorry, I'm about to win an auction on eBay. And I won. That's awesome. Jessica Jones Season 1, you are mine. So let me know in the comments whether you loved or hated Iron Lung. I know some people have been a little divided over it. My girlfriend and I had a great time. However, friends of mine and also just reviewers that I listen to have mentioned that they weren't as big on it just because it was not their thing. And they weren't as attached to it as, say, someone like me, even though I literally wasn't even a fan of the game until like a month ago. Either way, if you're going to disagree with people in the comments, please don't go at each other's throats. It's just a movie after all, not the most important thing in the world. Also, if you want more content from me that isn't YouTube exclusive, you can click the links in my description down below. They'll take you to multiple different social media platforms where I post tons of reviews that don't always make it onto this channel, and the ones that do make it onto this channel, I always post on those platforms long before I add together a video. And if short form content is your thing, then you definitely want to make sure you're subscribed to this channel, because as I add to my ever-growing movie collection, I'm on my way to 1,000 different titles, by the way. I always post a new video to document the new entries in my collection, so be sure to check that out. And until next time, guys, God be with you, and take care.